I was sitting in my therapist's office complaining about dating apps for probably the 10th session in a row when I said something that made my entire world shift. I want someone who really sees me, you know? Someone who understands how my mind works, who makes me feel safe enough to be vulnerable, who asks the right questions and actually listens to the answers. I paused, and in that pause, something clicked into place with devastating clarity. Someone exactly like you. Dr. Simone Reyes looked at me from her chair across the room, her expression calm, but something flickering behind her eyes that I had never seen before. She set down her notebook with careful precision. "Avery," she said quietly, "I think we need to talk about transference. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from, and please subscribe because this story is about to get significantly more complicated and painful before it gets better. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this situation. My name is Avery Sullivan. I am 28 years old, and I am an audiobook editor for a major publishing house in Chicago. Up until 6 months ago, my life was work, more work, occasional sleep, and a relationship with a man named Eric that was fine in the way that room temperature water is fine. Not bad, not good, just existing. We had been together for 3 years, living together for 1, and I think we both knew it was not working, but neither of us had the energy to do anything about it. Then I had what my doctor politely called a burnout episode, and what I less politely called a complete psychological collapse. I started having panic attacks at my desk. I could not sleep more than 3 hours a night. I cried in the bathroom at work for reasons I could not articulate. Everything felt overwhelming and pointless simultaneously. My boss noticed, my coworkers noticed, and finally Eric noticed enough to suggest maybe I should talk to someone. So I found Dr. Simone Reyes through my insurance network. Her profile said she specialized in anxiety, depression, and work-related stress, which covered basically my entire disaster of a mental state. I booked an appointment, showed up to her office in a building in Lincoln Park, and met the woman who would completely upend my understanding of myself. She was probably mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a low bun, warm brown eyes, and this presence that was simultaneously calming and alert. She wore simple professional clothes, a navy blazer and cream blouse, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm but gentle. "Welcome, Avery," she said, and there was the faintest trace of an accent that I would later learn was from growing up in a Filipino household. "Let's talk about what brought you here." That first session, I cried within 10 minutes. Not delicate tears, but ugly sobbing while she sat patiently and handed me tissues, and did not make me feel pathetic for falling apart in front of a stranger. I told her everything. The burnout, the relationship that felt like a performance, the constant feeling of being overwhelmed, the sense that I was failing at being an adult despite doing everything I was supposed to do. She listened, really listened, in a way I had not experienced before. She asked questions that made me think about myself differently. She pointed out patterns I had not noticed. And at the end of that first hour, I felt more seen than I had felt in years. We started meeting weekly. She helped me develop coping strategies for the anxiety. We talked about my tendency to intellectualize emotions instead of feeling them, about how I used work as a way to avoid dealing with my personal life, about the relationship with Eric that I was clearly staying in out of inertia rather than genuine connection. The work was hard. Therapy is not like in movies where you have one revelation and everything is fixed. It is slow and sometimes painful and requires you to confront things about yourself you would rather ignore. But Simone made it bearable. She had this way of being simultaneously compassionate and direct, never letting me hide behind deflection or humor, but also never making me feel judged. She remembered details from previous sessions, noticed when I was avoiding topics, celebrated small victories with genuine warmth. I started looking forward to our Thursday afternoon appointments in a way that felt slightly disproportionate to what they were supposed to be. About 2 months into therapy, I broke up with Eric. It was Simone who helped me realize I was not actually sad about the relationship. I was sad about failing at something I thought I was supposed to want. Eric took it well. We divided our belongings amicably, and I moved into a studio apartment in Wicker Park that was too expensive but had good light. Simone helped me process the weird grief of ending something that was not working, the strange relief mixed with failure. And somewhere in there, without quite noticing when it started, I developed feelings for her. Not the therapeutic transference she would later name, but actual attraction. I noticed the way she tilted her head when listening. I noticed the rare smile that transformed her whole face. I noticed that I dressed more carefully on Thursdays, that I thought about what I would tell her during sessions, that I felt genuinely happy walking into her office. I told myself it was just gratitude, just the normal positive feelings clients develop for therapists who help them. I did not let myself examine it too closely. 3 months into therapy, I decided to try dating again. Simone encouraged this as part of building a fuller life outside of work. So I downloaded apps, went on dates with women for the first time since college, and discovered that being intentionally queer in my late 20s was both exhilarating and terrifying. I went on probably 10 first dates over the course of a month. Some were fine, some were bad, none of them felt right. Which brings us to the session where everything changed. I was telling Simone about my latest disappointing date, a woman named Lauren who was perfectly nice but felt like we were reading from a script neither of us cared about. "It is just so superficial," I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. "Like, we talk about our jobs and our favorite restaurants and what shows we are watching, and it is all so surface level. Nobody really sees me." "What would it look like if someone did see you?" Simone asked, which was typical of her, turning my complaint into self-exploration. I thought about it, really thought. Someone who understands how my brain works, who knows that I use humor to deflect when I am uncomfortable, who asks questions that make me think differently about myself, who makes me feel safe enough to actually be vulnerable instead of performing a version of myself I think people want to see. Someone who genuinely listens instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. I paused, the words hanging in the air. Someone who makes me feel like I am interesting and worth paying attention to, not despite my messiness but including it. Simone was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but with an edge I had not heard before. "Avery, those are very specific qualities. It sounds like you are describing someone in particular, not a hypothetical. Where have you experienced those things?" And that is when it hit me. When the careful wall I had built between appropriate therapist appreciation and inappropriate feelings completely crumbled. I looked at her sitting across from me in her chair, notebook in lap, eyes full of professional concern, and realized with absolute devastating clarity that I was in love with my therapist. "Here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "in these sessions, with you." The words sat between us like a bomb waiting to detonate. Simone's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for me to read, before settling into careful professional neutrality. But I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of pain or recognition, or something I could not name. "Avery," she said very carefully, "I think we need to talk about transference." "Transference is when a client projects feelings onto their therapist," she continued, her voice steady, but I noticed her hands were gripping her notebook tighter than usual. "It is a normal and common part of the therapeutic process. The feelings you are experiencing, the sense of being seen and understood, those are real, but they are about the therapeutic relationship, not necessarily about me as a person. Does that make sense?" I stared at her, my brain processing too many things at once. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "Just transference?" She held my gaze for a long moment, and I saw her struggling with something, some decision she did not want to make. "I cannot answer that for you," she finally said. "But what I can tell you is that regardless of the nature of your feelings, I cannot continue to be your therapist now that you have disclosed this. We need to terminate our therapeutic relationship, and I need to refer you to a colleague who can provide you with the care you need." "Wait!" I said, panic rising in my chest. "You are ending our sessions? Because I told you how I feel?" "Avery, it is not a punishment," she said, and now there was definitely emotion in her voice, barely contained. "It is an ethical necessity. I cannot provide effective therapy to someone who has romantic feelings for me. It compromises the therapeutic relationship, and it would be irresponsible for me to continue. I will refer you to several excellent therapists, and I will make sure the transition is as smooth as possible. But yes, this needs to be our last regular session." I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. "You feel it too," I said, and it was not quite a question. "That is why you are being so careful about this. If it was just me having inappropriate transference, you would handle it differently." Simone closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, I saw something raw there before she shut it down. What I feel is irrelevant, she said quietly. My job is your well-being, and I cannot provide that anymore. I am so sorry, Avery. I left that session in a daze. I sat in my car in the parking lot for probably 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened. I had gone from complaining about dating apps to realizing I was in love with my therapist, to being told our relationship had to end, all in the span of 45 minutes. I felt like I had been emotionally eviscerated. Simone called me that evening, which was unusual. We had strict boundaries about contact outside of sessions. I need to schedule a final session with you, she said, professional but gentle, to provide closure and make sure you have resources going forward. And Avery, I want you to know that what we accomplished in our work together was real and valuable. This does not diminish that. I agreed to meet the following week, then spent the next 7 days in a weird limbo of grief and confusion and something that felt uncomfortably like hope. The final session was 2 weeks after the revelation. I showed up at her office, and the weight of ending sat heavy between us from the moment I walked in. Simone had compiled a list of therapists for me, complete with specialties and contact information. I found 3 who I think would be excellent fits for you, she said, handing me the printed list. I particularly recommend Dr. Aaron Patel. He specializes in anxiety and relationship issues, and he has availability in his schedule. I have spoken with him about your case, with your permission, and he is prepared to take you on as a client. I took the list but did not look at it. Can I ask you something? I said. Off the record? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I cannot promise I will answer. If circumstances were different, I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. If we had met at a coffee shop or a bookstore instead of here, would you have been interested? The silence stretched between us, painful and heavy. I watched her internal struggle play out across her face. Finally, she said, yes. But we did not meet at a coffee shop. We met here, in this office, where I held responsibility for your mental health. And that matters more than what might have been. So what do we do? I asked, and I was embarrassed to hear my voice crack. She leaned forward slightly, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. You go work with Dr. Patel. You continue the progress you have made. You figure out if what you feel is about me specifically or about what I represented in your healing process. And in 6 months, if you still feel the same way, my ethical obligations as your former therapist will have ended. But Avery, she said firmly, you cannot put your life on hold for a maybe. You have to keep living, keep growing. If what we both feel is real, it will still be real in 6 months. What if it is not a maybe? I asked quietly. Then it will still be true in 6 months, she repeated. That is the only way we can do this ethically. If at all. I started seeing Dr. Patel the following week. He was completely different from Simone, an older Indian man with a gentle manner and zero resemblance to the person I was trying not to think about constantly. The first session was awkward. He knew why I was there, knew about Simone, and did not dance around it. Dr. Reyes referred you because your feelings for her made it impossible for her to continue treating you ethically, he said matter-of-factly. That must have been very painful. How are you processing it? Badly, I admitted. I feel like I ruined something important, and I do not even know if what I felt was real or just some weird therapy-dependent thing. Over the next 6 months, Dr. Patel helped me unpack that question with excruciating thoroughness. We talked about my pattern of seeking external validation. We examined why I had fallen for someone in a caretaking role. We discussed the difference between transference and genuine connection. We explored whether I was capable of seeing Simone as a flawed human being rather than an idealized figure. It was grueling work, made harder by the fact that I genuinely missed her, missed our sessions, missed the specific way she understood me. But slowly, with Dr. Patel's help, I came to understand that what I felt for Simone was complicated, but not fabricated. Yes, there was an element of gratitude and caretaker transference, but there was also genuine attraction, intellectual compatibility, and something that felt like real recognition between two people. Dr. Patel helped me see that both things could be true simultaneously. The 6-month mark fell on a Thursday, which felt grimly appropriate since Thursdays had been our day. I was in session with Dr. Patel, talking about work stress, when he asked casually, "Have you heard from Dr. Reyes?" "No," I said. "I did not expect to." "Do you want to?" he asked. "Every single day," I admitted. "But I do not know if I should. What if I have idealized her? What if the version of her I fell for does not exist outside of that office? What if I spent 6 months mourning something that was never real?" "Those are valid fears," Dr. Patel said. "But you have done 6 months of work to prepare yourself to answer those questions. You are not the same person who walked out of her office in March. You have tools now to assess your feelings critically. Whatever happens, you will be able to handle it." My phone buzzed in my bag. I usually silenced it during sessions, but I had forgotten. "I am sorry," I said, reaching to turn it off. Dr. Patel held up a hand. "Check it. It might be important." I pulled out my phone and saw an email notification from Simone Reyes. Subject line, 6 months. My hands started shaking. I looked at Dr. Patel. "I think you should read it," he said gently. I opened the email. "Avery," it began. "It has been exactly 6 months since our last session. I hope your work with Dr. Patel has been valuable. I hope you are well. I have thought about you every day, and I needed to wait until I could say that without violating any ethical guidelines. I do not know if you still feel the way you did in March. I do not know if what we both felt was sustainable outside of a therapeutic context, but I would very much like to find out. If you are interested, and if you feel you are in a place where exploring this would not compromise your well-being, I would like to have coffee. Just coffee. 2 people getting to know each other without titles or roles. No pressure." But I had to reach out, because spending the rest of my life wondering what if seemed worse than risking rejection. Simone. I read it 3 times before I could speak. "She waited exactly 6 months," I said, my voice unsteady. "To the day." "What does that tell you?" Dr. Patel asked. "That she has been thinking about this as much as I have. That she took the ethical boundaries seriously. That I paused. That she might actually feel what I feel." "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to say yes," I said. "But I am terrified." "Of what?" "That it will not be the same. That who I fell for was Dr. Reyes, the therapist, and not Simone, the person. That we will meet for coffee and realize we have nothing to talk about without the structure of therapy. That I will disappoint her, or she will disappoint me." "Those are all possibilities," Dr. Patel said. "But Avery, you have spent 6 months preparing to answer exactly this question. You know yourself better now. You understand the difference between transference and genuine connection. You have tools to assess this relationship realistically. The only way to know if what you both felt can exist outside of her office is to actually try. Are you ready to find out?" I looked at the email again, at Simone's careful words, at the vulnerability in her admission that she had thought about me every day. "I am ready," I said. I replied to her email that evening after talking myself out of it approximately 12 times. I kept it simple. "Simone, I would love to have coffee. Thank you for reaching out. How is Saturday afternoon?" "Avery." Her response came within an hour. "Saturday is perfect. There is a cafe in Logan Square called Elixir. 2 p.m.? See you then." I spent the next 2 days oscillating between excitement and panic. What did you wear to coffee with your former therapist who you had confessed feelings for and who had essentially confirmed she felt the same? How did you act? What did you talk about? I called my friend Maya in desperation. "Just be yourself," she said, which was supremely unhelpful advice given that myself was currently a ball of nerves. Saturday arrived. I showed up at Elixir at 1:55, and Simone was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment we both froze, unsure of how to greet each other. In her office, we had never touched beyond that initial handshake. Now, with no professional boundaries, we had to figure out new parameters. She solved it by giving me a brief, slightly awkward hug. "It is good to see you," she said, and her voice had a warmth I had only heard traces of before. "You too," I managed. We sat, and I noticed she looked different somehow. Less composed, more nervous. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, and she was wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of professional attire. She looked more human, more accessible, and somehow even more beautiful. "I got you a latte," she said, gesturing to the cup in front of me. I remembered you mentioned liking them. You remember my coffee order from 6 months ago, I said, surprised. I remember a lot of things, she said quietly. Avery, before we talk about anything else, I need to say something. These last 6 months have been the longest of my life. I questioned my decision to end our sessions probably 1,000 times, but it had to be done. There was no ethical way forward without that separation. I know, I said. Dr. Patel helped me understand that. How has your work with him been? She asked, and I saw genuine professional interest in her expression. Good. Hard. He is very different from you, which I think was necessary. He helped me figure out what I actually felt versus what was transference. And what did you figure out? She asked, and now there was vulnerability in her voice. That it was probably some of both, I admitted. But mostly, I think it was real. I think I fell for you as a person, not just as my therapist. The therapeutic relationship gave me space to be vulnerable, but what I felt was about you specifically. The way you think, the way you listen, your particular sense of humor that you only showed occasionally. I missed you. Not just therapy, but you. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. I missed you too, she said finally, which was professionally inappropriate and ethically complicated and still completely true. I told myself that I was just concerned about your well-being as a former client. But that was not it. I missed our conversations. I missed your particular way of deflecting with humor when something was too real. I missed seeing you walk into my office every Thursday. She looked up and met my eyes. But Avery, I need us to be clear about what this is. We are not therapist and client anymore. We cannot fall back into that dynamic. If we try this, we have to build something completely new between us. Equal footing. No caretaker roles. I understand, I said. And honestly, that is terrifying because the version of our relationship I knew had structure. This does not. Exactly, she said. So maybe we just start simple. Tell me about your life now. Not as your therapist asking, but as someone who genuinely wants to know. What have you been doing for the past 6 months? We talked for 3 hours. Not about therapy or feelings or what we were trying to build, but just about life. She told me about her work with other clients, about the research paper she was writing, about her complicated relationship with her mother, who still did not fully understand why she had left teaching. I told her about work, about the audiobooks I had been editing, about my tiny apartment and my ongoing terrible attempts at cooking. We discovered shared interests I had not known about. We both loved historical fiction. We both had strong opinions about coffee brewing methods. We both found the same podcasts funny. It was easy and natural and completely different from our sessions, which had been about my interior life. This was about discovering each other as full people. When we finally left the cafe, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. Walk with me? She asked. I live about 10 blocks from here. We walked slowly, talking and occasionally lapsing into comfortable silence. At her building, she turned to face me. I would like to do this again, she said. If you would. I would really like that, I said. She smiled, and it was that rare, full smile I had seen maybe twice in our months of therapy. Good. Maybe dinner next week? I will text you. She reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, then let go and headed inside. I walked back to the train feeling lighter than I had in months. We saw each other once a week for the next 3 months. Slowly, carefully, we built something new between us. Coffee turned into dinners, turned into walks along the lake, turned into her inviting me to her apartment to watch a movie. We learned each other outside the constraints of professional roles. I learned that she was funny in a dry, observant way. That she stress-baked and would show up to our dates with containers of cookies. That she had strong opinions about architecture and would point out details of buildings as we walked. She learned that I was more relaxed outside of therapeutic context, that I was affectionate and tactile, that I had a surprisingly competitive streak that emerged during board games. And through it all, the attraction that had sparked in her office only grew stronger now that we could actually acknowledge it. 2 months into dating, we had our first real argument. About something stupid, I do not even remember what, but it escalated because we were both scared of conflict in this new dynamic. We had never disagreed when I was her client, because that was not how therapy worked. Now we had to figure out how to fight fairly, how to repair after hurt, how to be messy and human with each other. We got through it, but it was hard. That night, sitting in my apartment after we had both apologized and worked it out, she said, "This is the real test, you know. Not whether we get along, but whether we can handle when we do not." "I think we can," I said. "We both know how to communicate, and we both actually want this to work. That is more than a lot of people have." 4 months after our first coffee, Simone asked me to be her girlfriend officially. We were at her apartment cooking dinner together, and she just turned to me and said, "I love you. I need you to know that. Not as your therapist, not as someone who helped you through a difficult time, but as someone who genuinely loves who you are." "I love you too," I said and kissed her. We made the relationship official on social media, told our friends, began actually building a life together. 6 months after that first coffee, almost exactly a year after our final therapy session, we moved in together. Into a new apartment, not hers or mine, so we could build something that belonged to both of us equally. Now, a year and a half after everything started, I can look back and see how necessary that separation was. How the 6 months apart, the work with Dr. Patel, the slow rebuilding, all of it was required for us to have something real and sustainable. We still have moments where old patterns emerge, where I look to her for answers she cannot give anymore because we are partners now, not therapist and client. We check ourselves, we talk it through, we stay conscious of the dynamic we left behind. It is not perfect. It is complicated and requires constant attention, and occasionally still feels surreal. But it is real, and it is ours. Simone taught me to feel my emotions instead of intellectualizing them. And now I get to feel this, the fullness of being loved by someone who knows me completely. Not because she analyzed me, but because she chose me. And I chose her. The woman who helped me see the truth and who turned out to be part of that truth all along.